Today we are working on the second portion, the second installment of our mask. So I have my container right here. I've gotten it out of my cubby. I'm going to take this very carefully out. I'm going to put my hand underneath the mask to support that. With one hand, the other hand, I'm going to grab onto the rest of my clay and move it over. And I'm going to put this underneath my seat so that nobody trips over it, but it's still handy. So I'm going to set it right over here. Now I'm going to very carefully, very softly open up the bag of clay. I'm going to take my mask right here and I'm going to set it just off to the side. And then I'm going to take my ball of clay and we're going to start with adding some features to our mask. So I want to make sure that my mask is not in the way, and I'm going to be using a lot of the same materials as we did on the first day. So I have my drop cloth, got a rolling pin, those slats are making a comeback, and I will also be using a needle tool or a paper clip to do my drawing stuff. So I've got my ball of clay right here, and remember the first thing we like to do whenever we are rolling a slab, remember that's our clay pancake, is I like to take my ball of clay. Again, it's helpful if you can smooth out some of those cracks in our clay, because remember, crack is whack, and you definitely want to make a small crack into nothing, because if you have a really large separation in your clay, a lot of times you just have to ball it back up and start over, because it's too dry and it's not really fixable at that point. Okay, so the only fix really is kind of starting over. So I'm taking this here, smoothing this on out. Right? And I'm going to take this and I'm going to start pressing down just to flatten it a little bit, because it makes it a lot easier. I'm all about doing things the simple way, work smarter, not harder. So I've got my kind of section here. It's flat. I do have some major crackage coming over here, so I'm going to smooth these out. Okay? And remember, the softer your clay is, the easier it is to smooth out those edges, because it's so soft, it'll just meld together. If your clay has gotten pretty dry at this point, maybe you've rolled it out a lot of times, then you might use a tiny bit of water. And what that looks like is just dipping your finger into some water and taking that and spreading that water over the clay. It does not take a lot. If you use a lot of water, you're going to end up with some mud, and that is really hard to work with. Okay, so I've got this pretty smoothed out. I'm going to take this, my slats, and my rolling pin, and I'm going to roll out a slab just like we did on day one. Rolling, turning it, rolling, turning this again. Remember, it helps keep it nice and even, and then I can take my clay and flip it on over. Oh my goodness, look at all of these cracks. I'm going to smooth these out again. So really smooth that in together. Now this one is a little bit more finicky, so I'm going to dip my finger into some water. And do you see how there's not a lot of water, but it is more than enough to help smooth that out. Okay, all right. Now I'm going to start rolling again. One quick thing before I start rolling is that when you're using water, you do want to make sure that it is smoothed out and kind of worked into this, because if you don't, and it's really soft or kind of goopy, it will stick to your rolling pin. So I'm going to roll this out here, turn it, and keep rolling. Rolling. Keep your clay rolling. All right. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to roll out the rest of the slab. I'll be right back. After I've rolled out my slab so that it's nice and even with these slats over here, I'm going to move them, and I'm going to do a couple of rolls without those. Remember, we don't want to roll too thin. We also don't want to go off the edges. We're staying on our clay, but going to the edge. And can you guys see that right there? That's my arch nemesis, air pocket. So I'm going to take one of my pokey tools, and I'm just going to pop that little bubble there. And you usually have to do more than one air vent, and then I'm just going to press that down. Okay, let's see. I have another little one right here. You can see them kind of pop up whenever you're rolling because it literally just looks like you have a little bubble under the surface. Okay, and I have one more over here, I think. Okay, so we're trying to just, fight crime over here. Stay away from those evil air pockets. Okay, and I have this rolled out here. Sounds like class is over. Let's move on. I'm just kidding. So I have this here, and I'm going to start drawing out some of my features that I want. I think one of the easiest things to do first is the very middle of the face, which is the nose. So you're going to think about what nose shape you were planning for on your mask. You want to make sure that you're not drawing a super huge nose that doesn't fit on your mask, of course. So pay attention to the size as you are sketching this out. And again, you can do a soft sketch first. For me, I'm just going to cut right on into it. And I want to do a shape. I think I'm going to do just an easy little triangle here. So I'm cutting my triangle shape out here. Now, when we're not using clay, a lot of times we will ball it up. If you are looking at the clock and you're like, man, I still have a decent amount of time to go, you can leave this here for now. I am going to lift this up just so I don't have to roll it out later. And I'm going to take my nose shape carefully out of it. Okay, and I'm going to leave this slab here just to save myself some time because rolling it out a lot can also make it dry out a little bit quicker. So I'm going to take my extra clay, keeping it as a slab. I'm going to move it off the side or off camera. I'm going to go ahead and grab my mask right here, looking great, and I've got my nose shape right here. Now I need you to pay extremely close attention for this next step. Okay, for our next step, we're going to be adding our nose shape to our face. Okay, now this is extremely important. If I am taking two separate pieces of clay and I'm putting them together, I cannot simply press this on. Even though it sticks now, it will not stay on there in the future. Okay, once it starts to dry out, a lot of times before it even goes into the kiln, it will start to separate, or it might make it to the kiln, but by the time it's in the kiln, the high temperatures will cause these two pieces to separate from each other. Okay, clay sometimes doesn't get along with other bits of clay, and so you have to create a strong bond for them. Okay, the way that we do that is by doing some scoring and slipping. So that's two steps: score and slip. I'm going to take I've got my nose where I want it. I'm going to just take my my sharp tool here, my detail tool, my drawing tool, and I'm just going to very lightly trace around the shape. This is so I know where my nose is supposed to go on my face, on my mask, so you can see that shape there. So we're not doing any cutting into the clay, we're just tracing around it. Now, for scoring and slipping, scoring is basically where you create a texture on both pieces, kind of like Velcro, so they stick together. Okay, you can do this with this tool, or even something that looks like this. This is called a rib, and it's got some zigzag edges here. Okay, I'll show you what they all look like. So with this one, if you're using a tool like this, on the face itself, you're going to make some cross-hatching marks. So you're kind of basically making some diagonal lines. And it doesn't have to be pretty. It's okay if you go outside a little bit of your shape, just a little, not a ton. So you're making that texture there like that. Okay, so that's what it looks like with a paper clip. If you're using a sharp tool, again, you want to be careful not to go all the way through, but I'm going to go the opposite direction now. Okay, going across just like this. You always want to have that crisscross there. So this is called scoring. Okay, so I have a score over here, and now I'm going to work on my nose, and I'll show you with this tool. Okay, so with this tool, I'm going to go across like this. You can see that, well, it's kind of hard to see. This texture that's happening here. Okay, so I'm going to score diagonally in one direction just like I did, and it's going to go back the opposite way. we're kind of roughing it up just a little bit. Okay, so we've got 2 textured areas. Awesome. Now, we're going to do this next part, and this is the slip portion. Slip is when you take some clay and you water it down so that it's very, very runny, and it kind of acts like a glue. A lot of times, we can also just get away with using water depending upon what stage your clay is at. Since we're still working with pretty new clay, I'm just going to use a little bit of water, and I have it in this cup right here. Okay, when I'm using this water, I'm just going to dip my finger in. I'm not going to dip any clay, I'm not dumping it, I'm just taking my finger and dipping that in the water, and I'm going to kind of add some water to both pieces over the area that I just scored. Okay, so we have the score, now we're working on the slip. Okay, I'm going to take some more water and do this side over here. Okay, and my next step is just to take my nose, I'm going to flip this over, place it, kind of line it up to where my original outline was, and I'm going to kind of, as I'm pressing it in, I'm not pressing it super hard, but I am kind of rocking it back and forth a little bit. That kind of helps those textures we made kind of lock together. Okay, they're forming a bond. I'm kind of pressing this down. You can see some water oozing out on the sides a little bit. That's good. That means you're kind of getting it on there. Then I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to dip it in my water again, and I'm going to go around the edge, and I'm going to just kind of create a little bit of a slip to kind of help secure the outer edge of my nose all the way around. Okay, you're going to do this for every single feature. You'll do this for your mouth, any designs that you're adding on, your eyebrows, all of that will be done just the same. You have to do it for every single thing. And if you don't do it and it comes out of the kiln with missing pieces, I will know that you did not do it, even if you swear up and down that you did, because this is a really good way to keep this nice and connected to your mask. Okay, so that's how we do our scoring and slipping. We've added our first feature. We're going to look at this next step, looking at the eyes. Okay, so since our clay is pretty fresh, right, you might be working with either some teenager clay or some baby clay or maybe somewhere in between. And so when we're working on the eyes, you only want to draw the eye shape on. We're not going to cut them out yet. That's going to come at a later time when the clay has dried out to the point that it feels like leather. That is called leather hard. And that means that a lot of the moisture has come out. It's still a little bit workable. It can also potentially be a little crumbly, but it is strong enough to be able to cut into. Same thing with adding our textures. Okay, so for example, on mine, I can take my tool here and say that I want my shape for my mask to, maybe I want to do a shape like this. So I'm going to do like a half circle, and then a half circle over here. And I'm just lightly drawing this on. This is going to help you place the rest of your stuff, of course. Right, so I've got my little half circles. I'm a little wiggly today for some reason. And I'm just kind of taking those extra bits of clay, but I'm not going to carve into it until later. So I'm keeping these here for now, okay, but I can start working on the rest of it. So I can work on my eyebrows, I can work on the mouth itself, and I can do this in my next piece of, or in the rest of my clay. Now, if it's time for cleanup, you know the drill. You're going to take your clay, ball it up. You're going to take your mask. We're going to put it in the bag, just like we did for the first day. It's going to go back into your container, in your little box, into your cubby. And you want to be careful. We'll do a little spray, but you want to be careful this time. We're going to still place it on here, but we're going to be so, so gentle. Okay? And that's for our cleanup stuff. Okay? If you look at the clock and you got your first feature done and you're like, man, we have 20 minutes or more until the end of class, you can go ahead and start working on cutting out your next feature and scoring and slipping it onto your mask. Okay, if you look and you're like, man, it looks pretty close, I would start the cleanup process just because clay takes the longest to clean up, I think, out of all of the types of projects that we do in class. Okay, so you need to kind of look at that, look at what time we get out of class, and really judge if you have enough time. Okay, as always, if you see any cracks or any rough edges, you'll want to smooth those out. The earlier you can do it, the better. Okay, you'll go ahead and add the rest of your features. And on our next one, we'll look at what it looks like to add in texture and to take out these eye shapes.